Yeah, smells like a good old-fashioned fight.
Welcome to IAYTD and welcome to my review for Blood Bowl 2 on PS4. Some context. This game is based off of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, a tabletop war game, which was then made into a tabletop game called Blood Bowl, which was then made into a video game. I've played my fair share of Warhammer, but I've never played Blood Bowl. But I could tell immediately that this video game seemed like a direct translation. I was expecting something like Madden, where it was just brutal football with fantasy creatures, but instead this feels more like chess, where every move is vitally important and must be thought out. When you start the game, the campaign acts as a long tutorial, with each game introducing new mechanics and framing it in a storyline where a human team tries to make their way to the top. Each game you'll play against another fantasy army such as dwarves or orcs. You have players that somewhat have specialties, and you choose to move each player one at a time, having a grid that shows where you can move to. When you get close enough to another player, you can attack them on either offense or defense and try to take them out. When I say take them out, sometimes you'll just knock them out, maybe even injure them, or sometimes even straight up kill the other characters. This means that your characters can be killed as well, which is a very disheartening experience. Everything you do, including every attack, every pass, everything, depends on the roll of a dice. You might throw a pass and just absolutely miss because your dice roll was too low. Even if you try to run too far, you might slip on the grass. You might try to get away from your opponents, but they trip you or swat at you. Now let me talk about this campaign because this comes into play here. The first 3 or 4 games that you play, when a player gets knocked down, when you trip, whatever, the game continues. That player just didn't do too hot. The game felt awesome though, when a huge dwarf would knock out another character, and it just felt really cool. However, the game eventually introduces the mechanic that every time your player gets tripped, knocked out, fails a roll, whatever, you immediately end your turn and now your opponent goes. So imagine, it's your turn, you try to throw a pass or something and it fails, now it's your opponent's turn. It ends all sense of excitement and instead makes every action feel huge. Now, this might be intentional. It does make the game 1,000 times more strategic. You can't just do anything you want. You have to think about the order of things. Don't try that big risky maneuver first because it could end your turn. Even things like picking up the ball could result in a slip and immediately end your turn. The game is set to a certain number of turns, so a game passes pretty quickly when these turnovers happen often. So here's what you need to know. This game requires more patience than you would expect. While it looks brutal and it's full of fights, it's mostly a game that requires you to think about every move carefully before you do anything. It's an amped up version of chess, where your pieces try to get the ball to the end zone. This is not a crazy brawler. Once you come to grips with this, the game is incredibly fun. The teams you'll face off against are varied and interesting. You can play as them in random matches or against them in the campaign. You'll upgrade specific characters with unique skills, which make them more suited for different tasks. Maybe you outfit a certain character to be an exceptional passer, so he has a higher chance to succeed. And as players get injured or killed, you replace them on your roster with new players. So here's the downside. Even once you come to grips with the fact that this is a strategic game, it still focuses almost entirely on luck, which makes all of your forethought meaningless. You might have done everything right, but when your attacker fails their roll and that big skull comes up, that means your player gets knocked out instead. Turn over. One failed attack roll could even kill your attacking player. You get a finite amount of chances to re-roll dice and a few other things you can do to minimize this risk, but the randomness of the game makes all of this thought and strategy frustrating. In the campaign, you might have a helicopter crash into the field or a referee who attacks your players between rounds. This game can't have it both ways. If it were a fun and crazy brawler with some randomness thrown in, sure, that'd be fun. Or it could be a strategy game that allows you to plot out your actions and really think about them. But instead it tries to do both, and it makes for a very frustrating experience. I had to replay a match in the campaign 8 times to finally beat it, even after I understood the risks and the rewards of the game. There is no difficulty setting to change, so some of you might immediately hate this game for its harshness, especially once the tougher rules start getting implemented in the campaign. But if you enjoy the fantasy setting, and this gameplay looks fun, you might have a great time. I enjoyed most of it, but the randomness really frustrated me, especially after investing time into thinking it through just to have your star player killed because of a bad dice roll. The game also has some serious glitches where it would just stall and wait. The opposing player would get control of the ball and then just wait. Whole minutes sometimes until they just eventually decided to make their moves. It was really frustrating. I'm giving Blood Bowl 2 a 3 out of 5. It has big pros and big cons, but some of you may really enjoy it if you appreciate maybe the more strategic nature of some of these games. So let me know below if you play Blood Bowl 2, if you like it, if you didn't like it, if you tried it, anything, let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.
They'll need to get rid of the ball now there's pressure on them.